The literature on Old Testament violence is littered with giant works describing a solution. The thing that's interesting is the literature is not littered with detailed explanations of the problem. Well, there are some explanations of the problem, but we don't ever really get the problem explained in an explicit logical form. Now, there are some ways that it is expressed that way, but they are far and few between. And when they are expressed that way, it's really not super rigorous. So, to try to fill this gap in the literature, I try my best to kind of come up with a logical version of the problem of Old Testament violence, which takes its cue from James Sturba's new logical problem. So, the first premise is necessarily if God exists, then God doesn't command actions that constitute moral atrocities, such as the deliberate and merciless killing of innocent men, women, and children. Necessarily, if God exists and the biblical Old Testament texts are his authoritative word, then God commands actions that constitute that, as in the conquest of Canaan, the Amalekites, and so on. So necessarily, from those two, it follows that if God exists and the biblical Old Testament text are his authoritative word, then there's a contradiction. God both does and does not command these atrocities. And number four, it is moving from the conditional to the actual, namely, the biblical texts do portray God as issuing such commands. And then it follows from 5 that God does not exist, or the biblical texts are not his authoritative word. Now, I will put the whole argument down below. I know it's kind of a lot to digest, but it really does force the issue. You have to deny one of these premises, or you have to just swallow that either God does not exist or the biblical texts aren't inspired by God. What route would you go? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I hope it sort of clarifies the problem and gives you specific targets to aim at in defending Scripture and the goodness of God from this problem of Old Testament violence in its logical form.